Good evening, everybody. Welcome to episode 57 of The Game Changers. I'm your host, Carla, tonight, and I have a fantastic episode lined up for you. I'm honored to feature Marcus Grant. He brings a wealth of knowledge and experience that I'm sure you will find enlightening. We will dive deep into some engaging discussions and explore fascinating topics. Stay tuned for an insightful and entertaining show. I have a tongue twister right now. Before I dive into tonight's episode, I want to extend my sincere gratitude to Evan, Iggy, JC, and the whole TSA team for their invaluable support in providing me with this platform to engage with distinguished leaders and innovators within our community. Join me as I explore the lives and stories of my guests, uncovering their personal insights, experiences in fantasy football, and much, much more. The Game Changers is not your ordinary podcast. It has fostered a cherished community, and I'm honored to share this journey with all of you this evening. Who is Marcus Grant? Marcus Grant is a seasoned sports journalist and fantasy football analyst. Born and raised in Vallejo, California, hopefully I pronounced this right, a graduate of Hogan Senior High School, Marcus earned his bachelor's in broadcast journalism from the University of Southern California. His passion for sports has driven his career, allowing him to talk and write about sports for nearly his entire adult life. Marcus Grant, his career is play-by-play announcer and sports talk radio, update anchor and show host. In 2011, he joined the National Football League as an associate fantasy football editor for NFL.com. Over the years, his role expanded and he became a familiar face on television as an analyst on NFL Network, NFL Fantasy Live. In 2022, Marcus joined Matthew Berry's Fantasy Live team, further cementing his place in the fantasy football community. He also contributes to local radio, sharing his insights on ESPN 710 in Los Angeles. When I was looking to find out more about Marcus Grant, I found that he have a lot of achievements and awards and honors. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. For NFL.com, he played a key role in developing and expanding fantasy football content, contributing to the platform's growth and popularity. For NFL Fantasy Live, he became a prominent analyst, providing expert insight and analysis on national television. Matthew Berry's Fantasy Live, he joined a renowned team of fantasy football experts, enhancing the brand's reputation and reach. For the local radio, he's a regular podcaster, shares his expertise on ESPN 710 in Los Angeles, engaging with a broad audience. Awards and honors for Fantasy Sports Writer Association, as we know it as the FSWA Award. Marcus Grant was recognized for his outstanding contributions to fantasy football journalism. He had an Emmy nomination, part of the NFL Fantasy Life team that received an Emmy nomination for Outstanding Studio Show, Limited Run. And he was top 100 fantasy football experts. I cannot believe that. Consistently ranked among the top fantasy football experts by various industry publications. Despite Marcus Grant's professional success, he remained a kid at heart. He enjoys sports, cartoons, comic books, and graphic novels as much as classic literature. Music is his refuge, Los Angeles his muse, and he still treasures his work in Atari 2600 double O's, right? Marcus Grant, welcome to the show. I cannot believe all of these successes, all these awards and honors. and then we see you at the expo, and you are that guy who talks to everybody with so much respect. What
Well,
makes Marcus Grant different?
I don't know. I mean, well, first off, thank you for having me on, Carla. It was
Yes,
fun to
an
kind of hear all
honor.
that. There was stuff in there that I don't think I even knew. Right, some of these nominations and stuff for things like I don't think I even knew about it. So it was kind of fun hearing things about myself. Um, I don't know. I know. Here's the thing. I will say this. I am honored. I am humbled that people really respect and like what I do. And I really am truly appreciative of everybody. Like when I go to the expo, who wants to come by and say hello and have a conversation. Unfortunately, like there's just not enough time, obviously, to talk to everybody. But I certainly try to communicate and connect with as many people as I can. But I really am grateful for it, and I will say that um, for as much as I think, I hope people get out of meeting me, it does a lot. It sort of is re-energizing for me personally and spiritually in a lot of ways to kind of connect with people who are like-minded, who do what I do, and who all have a respect for what we all do here. I think sometimes, especially I think after the pandemic, right? I think 2020 was hard for a lot of us. Um, and I think doing our shows, doing our podcasts, doing it from home, and being separated from everybody else. After a while, it sort of felt like you were just putting things out into the universe, and you didn't really know who was watching or who was listening or anything like that. And so to go to the expo the following year and seeing everybody there and connecting with people, it's sort of I don't know how to say it, but like I said, it re-energized me more than anything else, right? It made me really understand that there is a community here, and so I think that's some to do with it. The way I just sort of interact with people. I think the other part of it is on my way to getting to where I got, Carla. It. I went through a lot, man. Like I really had to grind, and I don't forget that. I mean, it's the reason why for a long time I would do every podcast I was invited on. Like I've had to learn to say no now, just because my schedule has gotten busier and it's harder to get involved. But I remember doing a podcast before podcasts were big. Funny story about that. I did a podcast with some friends before we knew you could actually make money off of podcasts. Our goal was to do a podcast and see if we could sell it to a radio show and turn it into a radio station and turn it into a radio show. But I remember being grateful for anybody who would come on and be a guest on our show. I was grateful when I was a radio producer, anybody who would come on and be a guest. And so I felt like I owed it to other people to sort of pay that forward. So when somebody came to me about being on their podcast, or they were just starting out with a podcast, I really wanted to try and give other people the same boost that I got from when I was back in that space. And so, I just remember all those days of struggling, of working 2 and 3 jobs just to try to make ends meet on my pathway here. And so I don't take it for granted at any point. And so I'm always grateful to try and help out and try to, again, just to try to pay it forward whenever there's somebody who wants advice or just, wants a conversation with me.
That's amazing to hear. Like paying forward. It's not everybody can do that, or not everybody will, go back to where they start and where they are right now, because they forget how they start. I love that you didn't forget how you start, and you're putting yourself that in a place to bring people that they need help, Marcus. That's just amazing. I want to talk a little bit about a coach that passed away not a long time ago. It's John Alexander Robinson, and because you went to University of Southern California, so he was the American football coach for the University of Southern California football team and the NFL Los Angeles Rams. So his USC teams, when I did some research, won 4 Rose Bowls and shared the national championship in 78 season, 1978, which when I was born.
Mm.
Robinson is among a few college coaches with non-consecutive tenures at the same school, and was inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame in 2009. What personal impact did Coach Robinson influence your time at USC, both as a student and in your career, Marcus?
It's funny because he was the coach my first 2 years, my freshman and sophomore year at USC, and that was my first real taste of working in sports media. At that point, I worked for the student radio station when I was in college there, and so we would go to his weekly press conferences. We would broadcast the games. We would try to get interviews, with players and that sort of thing. And so that was kind of my first real instance of being able to sit in a kind of a group setting and ask questions and record interviews and kind of report back afterwards. So, it was kind of an interesting time there. And definitely to be at a school like USC, which, has been known for its football program for decades. Admittedly, the second time around for John Robinson wasn't quite as successful as the first time around, but it was still a very high-profile program, right? It was still the kind of place where athletes wanted to go. That was always going to be on television. And so to kind of be a part of that was really, really interesting. I think it definitely helped in terms of, my preparation and learning sort of how to do interviews and talk to players. And, it also sort of taught me about having to kind of hustle for things a little bit because, admittedly, at least at the time, the student radio station didn't necessarily get a ton of respect from the athletic department. We kind of had a little bit of an adversarial relationship mostly because of things that happened long before I ever got there. But, we sort of had to learn how to work with, people that didn't always necessarily want to give us, great accommodations for things. And so that was kind of a big part of it too. But, I wouldn't trade it for anything, right? It was just an enjoyable time, right? My time in college was enjoyable. I loved being a part of it. But it definitely kind of got me ready for how to do the work, for sort of having to interact with people that are very high profile and having to understand them. So, I'm certainly glad I went through it. I always tell people that if you want to have a career in sports and sports media, I think it always helps if you're going to pick a college, if that's what your route is, and it's, look, it's not for everybody, but if that's what your route is, I always suggest picking a school that has a big athletic program. Maybe it's not football, maybe it's basketball, maybe it's, it's another sport, but something that gets a lot of attention because that gives you an idea on some level of what it's like to cover a professional program or any other big program if you want. It's nice to sort of get that feel of it as a student and kind of get your education that way, and then you're ready to go for whenever graduation hits.
That's awesome. I always loved the journalism, and instead of journalism, I went to teaching. But that's why I was like searching a lot about who Marcus Grant is, and I dig deep into my stuff because I love journalism from the beginning, and it's good to learn at the start at in your school, in your college. And this is how you start small and you become big and you learn so much from that. How about what was it like growing up at Vallejo, California for you?
It's funny. So Vallejo, it is
Vallejo.
still
Okay.
Vallejo. Yeah, it's fun fact. It was named for Mariano Vallejo, who was one of the early governors of the state of California back when it was still kind of patrolled and owned by the Spanish, and Mexico had a big influence there. But it was always a working class town. It was a very heavy Navy town when I was a kid. There was a naval base in the city. It's actually what brought my grandparents from like Texas and Arkansas and Louisiana. They came out to California. They came to Vallejo to get jobs at the naval base there. And so, it's funny because in high school, I thought I wanted to be like a serious news anchor. Like I thought my career path was going to be just sort of like, hey, I'm gonna be on television news. I'm gonna be a nightly news anchor. I'm gonna host the ABC World News or NBC or whatever. I thought that's kind of where I was gonna go, but I'm very grateful that I had parents who were very supportive, very encouraging of what I wanted to do. Who certainly didn't, they didn't decide where I should go. They kind of let me find my own way. And, it was nice kind of growing up in a town where back in the days when the middle class still sort of existed in this
Right.
country,
Yeah.
that we were definitely not rich, but we weren't ever in need of anything either. And so it was kind of nice to look back now on the kind of suburban middle class lifestyle that I had, and it allowed me a chance to kind of explore and be creative and be curious about a lot of things. I had a mom who, during the summers especially, when my sister and I were sitting around the house bored with nothing to do, she would always say, "Why don't you just go to the library?" And we would either
Nice.
get on our bikes, or we take the bus or whatever. We would go to the library and get some books and spend an afternoon there. So it sort of allowed me to be intellectually curious growing up, and then fortunate to be able to go to USC and kind of grow from there. But I look back on my childhood, and I feel very fortunate that I was able to kind of grow and have fun and learn and have a lot of great friends that I still have to this day. But also that I think it did sort of provide a path. I didn't know I was going to be here doing fantasy football for all these years, but it certainly provided me an opportunity to kind of feel out what I wanted to do and help me get there.
Wow, that's amazing. I love this story, Marcus. You're gonna see I butcher a lot of names.
All good.
So that's
All good.
that's part of what I do. So would you say that your mom inspired you to pursue a degree in broadcasting journalism, or who did inspire you to become a in broadcast journalism?
So the journalism part of it probably was my mom. She wasn't a journalist, but she always talked about writing for the student newspaper when she was in college, when she went to San Jose State, and she kind of really helped me with that. Writing was a thing that I loved early on in my life and did a lot of it, and she very much encouraged that part of it. The sports side of things 100% came from my dad. My mom did not, she didn't really care about sports one way or another, but my dad was very much into it. We watched stuff together. He was my coach when I played Little League Baseball. I played soccer as a kid, all those sorts of things. And so the sports side of this thing 100% came from my dad. The journalism and sort of writing part came from my mom. And so it just turns out that the two of them sort of, kind of came together. And now I get to be kind of a sports media person. And so, I guess I have both of them to blame and or thank for, for where I am right now.
For your career. That's awesome. Do you have any memorable moments in your early career?
Yeah, so it's funny. One of my first memories of sports reporting, I was in, I think I was in the ninth grade, and there was a 49ers wide receiver named Mike Wilson who played in the 80s, the early 90s. And he came to my school to talk to the kids, do an assembly. And so I was on the student newspaper at the time. And I was like waiting and waiting and waiting after school was over to try to get an interview with him. He was like he was talking to the principal or talking to some of the administrators around there. And so I'm like waiting and waiting and waiting. And finally, like I had to leave because I was like going to miss my bus home. I had to get home. So one of the guys that was with Mike Wilson said, "Hey, look, they're playing a charity basketball game tonight at such and such gym. Here's some tickets. Come on out. And when the game is over, I'll give you the chance to get an interview to ask him a couple of questions." Great. So I go to the game. It's me, it's my dad, and it's like two of my closest friends. So the four of us go to this game, and I find one of the organizers. I tell him what I'm there for. So I remember late in the game, they're like, "Okay, come stand on the sideline, come stand underneath the basket, and when the game's over, we'll take you in the locker room. You can do an interview." Like, great, this is cool. Like, like I said, I'm in the ninth grade. I'm 13, 14 years old. Like, this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me at this point.
Yeah.
And one of the guys playing in this charity game, another 49ers receiver, a different guy named John Taylor, who actually caught a Super Bowl winning touchdown once. I just remember he's playing in the basketball game. He gets a steal, and he's going in for a layup, and he makes the layup, and he kind of loses control, and he runs into me. I'm standing underneath the basket, and he crashes into me. And he was super nice. He helped me up. He asked if I was okay, and I was just amazed. Like, here again, 13-year-old me. One of the wide receivers from my favorite football team just ran into me. Like this was the best day of my life, 100%. And I just remember going in to the locker room afterwards and getting to ask. I think I asked each guy like one question, and basically I was like, "So I know you came to our school today. What'd you think?" And they, gave me some generic, like really feel good fluff answers. Like I don't even remember what they said. I didn't care. I was just so happy that here it is. I got run over by a player on my favorite team. I got to ask questions to a couple other players on my favorite team. I went back to school the next day and was like the happiest kid alive. So that was maybe my first real experience as a sports journalist.
That's amazing to have an experience at 13 and talk to someone like that. That's amazing. That's a great story. So how did you land your role as an associate fantasy football editor for NFL.com in 2011?
Sort of by accident. I always tell people that I didn't really go looking for this job as much as this job kind of found me. I had been working in radio for a long time. I'd worked in radio in various forms for about 10 years. And the company that I worked for, it was a national radio network. They were based in Los Angeles, but the company sold to a different person, and that person wanted to move it to Houston where he lived. So I look, I have nothing against the city of Houston, but I'm from California through and through. I didn't necessarily want to leave California, so I said thanks, but no thanks to the offer. And I'm like, I'll stay here and I'll figure things out. And so I spent almost a full year just unemployed, kind of freelance writing, doing whatever. And a former coworker at the radio station told me, hey, look, you should apply for jobs at NFL.com. They're always looking for people, especially in football season. He's like, I'm doing some part-time work over there. You should just try it out, see what's happening. I'm like, okay, great. I should also mention that in 2011, there was a lockout going on. There was a labor dispute between the owners and the players union. And there was a real serious question about whether or not there was going to be a season that year. But, like I said, I was unemployed. I was just trying to do whatever I can to pay bills and what have you. So I literally went to NFL.com/jobs or whatever the website was. I applied for 5 or 6 jobs on that website. I don't know that I was really qualified for any of them, but I was like, all right, well, these are the closest to what my experience is. So I'm going to apply for these jobs. And really a couple of months went by and I didn't hear anything from anybody because, again, they didn't know if there was going to be a season that year. So I had sort of forgotten about it. And one day out of the blue, I get a phone call from somebody at NFL Media asking me if I wanted to interview for a job writing about fantasy football. And I was like, does it pay? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, sure. So I went in, I interviewed for the job. Even to that point in my life, I kind of played fantasy football, but I didn't play it seriously. I played as a way to be social. I was in one league because it was a bunch of guys I knew from high school, and it was a way for us to sort of keep in touch. I was in another league because I had moved to a new city and I didn't know anybody, and a coworker invited me to be in his league. And I was like, this seems like a really good way to meet new people in a place where I don't know anybody. That was why I played fantasy. I didn't play it to win anything. So they asked me if I wanted to write about it. And I was like, sure, it's a job. I'll absolutely do it. So I interviewed, went in for the interview. 2 weeks later, I remember I woke up in the morning and I turned on ESPN and there was a report saying that the lockout was over. The players union and the owners have come to an agreement. We're going to have a season, game on. I saw that in the morning. Maybe a couple hours later, I got a phone call saying, hey, if you want the job, we want to hire you. I was like, great. So August of 2011 is when I started. I just hit 13 years there. It's been amazing. Wow. I started off as kind of a glorified copy editor. I was reading and editing other people's writing. I literally was a seasonal worker. Those first 2 years, I would show up. I'd start work in August. I would work through until March. and then they would let me go, and I would spend 5 months trying to figure out my life and how to pay bills for 5 months, and then I'd come back in August again. And fortunately, I was able to get hired full time, and here I am, right in the middle of my 14th season at the NFL.
That's amazing. Wow. What did motivate you to join Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life team in 2022?
Um,
Continuing to that.
yeah, you know what? I mentioned at the start how going to the expo was so energizing for me.
Yeah.
And look, and at the NFL, working at the NFL has been great. I am grateful to them for the opportunity. Working at the NFL is where I met my wife. We've got a 5-year-old son now, so I don't know that happens without the NFL. But also at some point you start to look. Anytime you stay in one place for a long time, it starts to feel old and a little bit stale. And so it was that summer, 2022, when Elliot Christ, the CEO at Fantasy Life, reached out to me and said, "Hey, look, we're building this thing. Matthew Berry is really putting his name out there, wants to build a new platform, wants to build a new site. He's like, we're interested in talking to you. Would you be interested in having a conversation?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." He's like, "We're gonna be at the expo." I'm like, "I'll be at the expo. Let's meet up." And had a chance to sit down and talk to Elliot, and he sold me on his vision for what they wanted it to be, what they were turning it into. Just by chance, I ended up meeting Dwayne McFarland, and we didn't know. We hadn't met each other. We didn't know each other. We just sort of kind of connected and really had a really nice conversation. After I told Elliot, like, "Hey, I'm on board. I'm interested." He's like, "Hey, by the way, if you know Dwayne McFarland, we want you guys to do a podcast together." I was like, "Funny you mentioned that, because I just met him, a couple days ago at the expo." But it was one of those things where having somebody sort of reach out to me, even all those years into my career, it felt good, right? It felt nice that somebody was noticing what I do. And I know that sounds weird for a guy who's on NFL Network, but it just felt nice that somebody was paying attention to what I did and liked what I did enough that they wanted to bring me into their group. So I am forever grateful to Elliot, to all those folks over to Matthew Berry, all those folks over there at Fantasy Life. It's been a lot of fun the last couple of years working with them. They've got a really good, talented group of people. And so it's just another thing I'm really grateful to have been a part of.
That's amazing. It justify what you do. I know it might be weird for other people, but it justify what you do to get called from like big names like that. That's really awesome. So rewinding a little bit about what you were talking and getting to meet up your wife in NFL. I
Yeah.
want to hear that story.
Well, so it's funny because, we didn't really ever work directly together or anything, but so we're in a new studio now. We've been there for a couple of years, but before, the other place was not quite as big. And so, I'll admit that I saw her walking around the campus, and she sort of caught my eye, but we never really had a chance to ever interact for anything.
Uh-huh.
The way we actually started talking was at the company holiday party. So folks, go to your company holiday party. Who knows what happens. But I just remember we were leaving the holiday party, me and some friends, and we were going to go to another bar sort of down the street for just kind of an after party. And to be honest, even to this day, I don't remember who first spoke to whom, but I just remember I was at the front waiting for my friends. She was sort of at the front waiting for her friends. We just started having a conversation. I was like, "Hey, well, if you guys are interested, we're going over to this bar down the street for the after party. You guys should come on by." We exchanged numbers. She and her friends came over. I bought her a Jack and Diet Coke. And as they say, the rest is history.
That's amazing. And now you have a 5-year-old son, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's awesome. Do you does he like to play any sports, or do you want him to become like you, a in fantasy football?
So
Journalist or what? What's his
I
call?
think he's finally starting to kind of get into sports a little bit. I'm not really pushing him toward that. If he decides to go that way, that's great. That's awesome. I just want him to find something that he likes that's going to make him happy. That's really all I want. I mean, at this point in his life, The kid loves animals. Like he very well might be a zoologist for all I know. He loves animals of all sorts. Like his favoriteest place in the whole wide world is the zoo. So like if that's what he wants to do, that's great. I will say that over the last few weeks, with me, like I work in football. Baseball is my first love. It is always my first love as a sport. And so for the last, few weeks, I have been just insane over watching the Dodgers in the playoffs and in the World Series.
No.
And so I think like anybody who's been following me on Twitter, I'm sure all the people who follow me for fantasy football were probably sick of me tweeting about the Dodgers nonstop for like 3 weeks. I've just been kind of nuts about it. And so he's kind of started to get into it, like I would be in the living room watching the game and like I would shout about something and he would come running in from the kitchen and he would say, "Go Dodgers!" And then he would run back to the kitchen afterwards, So I think he's starting to get into sports. He's getting into baseball a little bit. We took him to a Dodger game. He loved it because he got to eat half of his body weight in popcorn and ice cream. We took him to his first NBA game over the weekend, and afterwards he told us how much fun he had at the basketball game. So I think he's starting to sort of clue into sports a little bit. So we'll see. Maybe he'll get to the point where he wants to play. But honestly, I am not going to force that on him. If it's something he decides he wants to do, then I will absolutely nurture it as much as possible. But I'm not going to force that on him.
That's awesome. So while he is running out and in and screaming Dodgers, I had to sit with Doug to watch Dodgers. So so I was sitting watching the games. No, I love it too. It's really interesting, and he's with the Dodgers too. So you were
I didn't know that about Doug. So now Doug and I have something else to talk about the next time I see him in person. I didn't know he was a Dodger fan. So I always liked Doug. I always knew he was a good guy. Like now I can confirm. Now I know why.
Because he knows me. That's why, Marcus.
That's exactly why. 100%.
So how do you balance work between NFL.com and NFL Fantasy Live and your contribution to ESPN 710 in Los Angeles?
I realize that, for football season, basically from, say August through January, like football is sort of everything, right? And then the radio stuff is kind of fill in. It's sort of a side hustle, if you will. I try to do more of that, in the football off season. This past year, I was very fortunate to co-host a Dodgers show that we streamed on YouTube Monday through Friday. So that was a lot of fun to do. One thing, though, I have certainly learned over the years, especially now that, I'm a parent, is to kind of how to balance the work and the home life as well. So, I really do make it a point in the evenings to be at home, to be dad. I'm the guy who, I do drop off and pickups for school. I am the guy who I do most of the cooking at home. So I try to be home for dinner and stuff like that. And so, I do make it a point in the evenings to sort of carve out that time with the family. And then, once the kid goes to bed, I may do some research and grind on some stats and get ready for the shows or whatever. It's different. It's different now than when I was single and when I didn't have a kid, where I could spend all night just, sitting there and researching stats and watching games and grinding tape and all that kind of stuff. I've had to sort of learn, as my kid is growing, as I've kind of been here a long time, how to sort of balance what I do for work with the rest of my life. And I'll tell you this, there are certainly days where, I'm more willing to kind of put the work aside because I would rather just spend the time with my kid right now. So, but I do realize that this time of year, my time definitely is more. I'm busier this time of year, obviously, because of football season, but it also kind of helps me enjoy that when the season is over, I'm able to sort of slow down and relax a little bit, and then, we can do more family stuff, more weekend things, and that sort of stuff too. So I really have learned the work-life balance, especially in the last few years.
I agree. Being a parent, it's a juggle. Definitely.
Yeah. Yes.
It's a total different life. It is total different life.
Yes.
So what were some of the biggest challenges you faced as an associate fantasy football editor?
honestly, one of the biggest challenges that I faced when I first started this job was accepting that I was going to be wrong about stuff.
Wow.
You know,
That's, yeah.
it is because it's like, I mean, you know this. I mean, you play fantasy football and you see Doug and everything. Like, we're gonna be wrong. Like, as I've always, what I've learned, what I tell people all the time is that, like, predicting the future is hard, right? And that's basically what this job is. It's trying to predict the future. And yes, we've got our spreadsheets and we've got stats and we've got film and we can kind of figure out tendencies and trends and that sort of thing. But football is still a human endeavor. It is still a game played by human beings. And once they kick off the game, anything that happens is out of your hands. Like, you just don't know. You don't know, like, you don't want anybody to get hurt, but guys get hurt. Guys just have a bad day. It's just a thing that happens. And so, I remember when I first started this job, and I would, either I would say something on a podcast or I'd write something, and it would turn out to be wrong. Like, it would sort of hurt a little bit for two reasons. I mean, one, just because human nature is you don't want to be wrong, right? As human beings, we just want to be right about everything. But also because, I realized that people were reading my stuff or they were listening to what I was saying and they were using it to make decisions about their fantasy teams. And so, a part of me would feel like I've let those people down. And I think what I've had to learn is, like, people are still going to be disappointed when you're wrong about things. But you realize that, like, it's just impossible to get everything right, and things are going to go sideways. And so you just sort of learn to shake it off. You learn to do the best you can. You learn to explain your reasons for why. Everybody says process over results, right? So if you can explain your process and explain your thinking, your logic for why you did something, I've learned that people are accepting more of that. That even if you're wrong, if you can explain, like, well, look, this didn't work out, but I thought it would happen because A, B, and C. And, like, you start to understand that people are more accepting of you being wrong. And honestly, it just helps to every now and then just stand up and say, hey, yo, I screwed up. Like, and you do that, and people sort of are very, they're a lot more forgiving about it. And so I think that's been one of the things that it took me a good couple of years to sort of learn that. It's that, one, you're going to be wrong, and two, it's okay to be wrong because at some point, everybody's going to be wrong.
Of course, this is human nature. Everyone is going to be wrong. I agree with you 100%. And to talk about it and say that, I can be wrong, this is a huge deal. Like, it's really important as well. So, Doug is saying, regarding the human element, almost word for word, I usually say it's an imperfect game played by imperfect people, which is true. How has your writing style evolved since started at NFL.com?
I think I've, for lack of a better term, like, I don't care as much. And I guess I should explain what I mean by that. In the sense of that, like, now I just tend to sort of write almost stream of consciousness, right? Where, like, and I think it started, I really think it started during the pandemic when we were all at home and everybody was, we all had a whole range of emotions, right? From anxiety to depression, sadness, whatever it was, anger. We all had so many emotions. And I was, like, writing the sleepers column. And the sleepers column sort of became my own personal diary or my own personal way to sort of vent about what I was feeling during that period. And, like, at some point, I mean, I'm sure if I went back and read it, like, some of it is probably just really weird and sort of, just space headed or whatever. But, like, I just remember, like, before I would write it, I would go outside and just kind of, like, I lived in an apartment building. My wife and I and our son, we were, he was an infant. But we lived in this, like, small 2-bedroom apartment, and I would just go up to the roof. We lived near LA International Airport, and I could just watch the planes, like, come in and land, and I would just sit there and just sort of, try to take a few minutes to just kind of decompress and think about what I was going to say and just watch the airplanes and just let the thoughts kind of run through my head. And so much of it was just like, this is how I'm feeling and this is what's going on, and we're all sort of dealing with this. Oh, and by the way, hey, maybe start Miles Sanders this week. It was just like kind of stuff like that was
Yeah.
happening. And I just sort of kind of adopted that as we've gone on, of just this kind of like, hey man, this is an opportunity, just like, Lias, I know we're all here to talk about fantasy football, but just kind of whatever is on my mind, whatever weird things I'm feeling. Maybe it is something about being a parent. Maybe it's just, I have all this leftover Halloween candy that I don't want to eat, but I'm going to eat it anyway. I mean, it's just weird things. And so like I've started to incorporate that into my writing a little bit more, while also still trying to have a healthy dose of actual analysis and statistics, but just kind of infusing personality into it. And like I don't necessarily talk a lot about, certainly on social media, I don't like put a lot of my personal life out there, but it's kind of a chance to glimpse into kind of how I'm thinking or how I'm feeling outside of just the football space.
That's amazing, and I think it connects more with with everybody else too when they see that side of you. By the way, I don't play fantasy football. Just saying.
Oh, really? I see. I thought I figured Doug had you hooked in all this time. You know what? Carla, you are smarter than the rest of us. Like, don't start. All right. Stay away. Stay far away from this.
I don't think I would ever seeing Doug how he sits like every single night and like into the computer and his charts with the colors and everything. I'm like, you're crazy, man. I'm not.
Also, I will also say this, Doug, don't let her play, because the other part of this is my wife, she's not playing this year, but she played for the last few years and she never won her league. And she would always ask me, like, what's the point of being married to the NFL's fantasy guy if I can't win my fantasy league? And I'm like, it's not that easy. So, Carla, stay away from this terrible addiction. Doug, don't let her start. Everything's going to be better for both of you at that point.
I love it. I love that. Marcus, do you have any particular articles or pieces you've written that you're especially proud of?
Gee, that's a good question. I would have to really dig back in the archives. I will say this, the thing about doing a weekly column, and I'm sure everybody who's a content creator can tell you this, that it is sort of hard to write essentially the same column, 18 times, right? And like the names change and maybe some of the stats change, but basically you're doing the same thing 18 times. So I don't know if there's one in particular. I would say that, again, that 2020 season of writing that sleepers column was just, it was cathartic for me. It just really helped a lot, right? Because again, we were all dealing with stress, right? It was something that none of us had ever experienced before. And so that sort of helped, I think, kind of get me through it and kind of help me, stay a little bit sane as much as possible. So I don't know if there's one in particular, but I do say that whole series was good. I'll tell you the other thing that I did, and it's not fantasy football related. I don't even know if it's still on the, so I have my own website. Admittedly, I haven't updated it in years, but I was writing sort of weekly recaps of a very old TV show. It was an off-season thing I did to sort of keep my mind occupied. I found this very old TV show from like the mid-70s called Kolchak the Night Stalker. It was kind of a weird sci-fi monster hunting show. I found it for free on Amazon Prime. I just decided to watch all the episodes and write recaps of them. And I just released them one per week. And I mostly did it for my own entertainment to keep myself occupied. And I didn't love them. I didn't trust them enough, right, to tweet them out in the middle of the day. Like I would tweet them out, but like late at night, hoping that nobody saw them, because I'm like, I don't know if people like this or if it's weird and people are gonna hate it. And I was surprised by the number of people who somehow found them and gravitated them and would talk to me about them. Because again, like one, I would talk to like folks who were a little bit older than me who remembered the show when it actually came on, or people who had never heard of it who were just like, this show seems wild and like I'm just enjoying your recaps of them. So like that was a fun thing that I did. Maybe again at some point I'll find another show and do it. So they were weird. I'll say this, the moral I guess of the story is, if you create something, just trust that it will find an audience. Because I was really too scared to put this out for a general audience. I didn't know if anybody would connect to it. And was very pleasantly surprised to find that there was like a, kind of a small but passionate community who kind of waited on me every week to put these things out. It was a lot of fun.
That's crazy. I love that. What advice would you give to someone looking to balance multiple roles in the sport journalism industry, Marcus?
Oh man. I would think actually honestly I feel like nowadays in sports media you almost have to do multiple things now. It used to be once upon a time you could just sort of focus on one thing, right? You could be a
Yes.
broadcaster or you could be a writer or whatever. You could be on camera or whatever. But now because you know you see the big companies sort of shrinking a little bit, and layoffs unfortunately are a real part of being in sports media all the time. Now companies want people who can do multiple things, right? So it really does it really is important to learn how to do a little bit of everything. You don't have to be great at everything, but I think if you know a little bit of it, whether it is podcasting and writing, if you can do graphics, if you can edit video, all that stuff helps. And I think the beauty of the internet is that you can do it all relatively easily now. I'm old enough that when I first started and I was looking for broadcasting jobs, I'm using a whole lot of old timey words like cassette tape and envelope and
Yes.
mail. Like it used to have to record things on a tape and like make copies of these tapes and put them in envelopes and send them out in the mail to companies and to teams or whoever. Now with the internet, really all you need is a phone and an internet connection. And you can do
Right.
so many things. You can shoot things. You can edit things on a phone. You can send them via email. You can send them via social media. There's so many more opportunities to go out and sort of practice and hone your craft. It used to be when I graduated that they told people like you have to go to a small market. You might have to go to some small town, in the Midwest or in the South and get started there and kind of work your way up. Now you can start wherever you live and you can write, you can sort of do research. And I just say, take advantage of that opportunity, but really do learn as many different things along the way as you can. It's honestly why I enjoy talking to folks, on different platforms, like like JC and Iggy and these folks, here at TSA, all the people who started their own things because they've had to learn how to do so much of that. I actually tell people that I might be the worst person to ask for advice about getting into the fantasy industry because my first job in the fantasy industry was at the NFL. I'm grateful for it, but I walked into a situation where everything was already set up and built for me.
For you.
So I am honestly impressed, and I respect the hell out of the folks who have built their own platforms and built their own sites and learned it from the ground up, whether it's creating content, whether it's running the business side of things. I respect that, and I actually try to sit and watch and learn from them. Because I have no idea what the future is going to be for me, but to learn as many different things as possible means that whenever that next opportunity comes, I'll feel like I'm ready for it.
That's amazing. I mean, the TSA gave me my, my podcast as well, and we are at 57 today, which
Wow,
is
congratulations.
that's amazing. Yeah, yeah. They opened a big door for me. Who knew I wouldn't play fantasy football, but I have a fantasy football. Yes. So, like, what has been the most rewarding aspect of your career so far?
I think it's just meeting people, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's first and foremost, like I said, I met my wife. We have a son. That was great. But I've just made so many friends throughout the industry. I was very fortunate during my time there. We had a group in the fantasy department at the NFL. We called ourselves the Stronghold. And there were, basically four of us. They had a couple other guys who kind of came and went as well. But, we all did podcasts together. We all wrote columns. And on top of working together, we all just became really good friends in real life to the point that, we've all sort of scattered a little bit, but we all still stay in touch, I Matt Harmon, who is a legitimate superstar in this space over at Yahoo. We were fortunate to work together at the NFL. We became great friends to the point that I was a groomsman in his wedding, when he got married. There's a guy named Alex Gelhar who was great and really kind of kept us together. And he's since left to start a career as a public defender in the state of Wisconsin. One guy has left to go to EA Sports. James Coe was with us, and now he's doing big things both locally in Los Angeles. He started his own platform as well. But really, that was just kind of a special time in my professional life, just having us all together to really do something cool and create content, but to also be friends, like really legitimately good friends at the same time. I'm still honored and humbled when I run across somebody who says, "Hey man, we started listening to podcasts, or we got into fantasy because of what you guys in the Stronghold were doing, and we loved that show, and we miss it, and we wish it could come back." I am still grateful to those guys because they made me better at this job. And I would say the thing that I think I loved the most about it is, there are so many times when you are in a special period of your life, but you don't realize it until it's over, and you look back and you're like, wow, that was really, really cool. What I loved about us as a group is that I think we all sort of realized in the moment that what was happening was something really cool and really special. And we were certainly all sad when it came to an end, but at the same time, we were really, really glad that we got the opportunity to do it together.
That's awesome. So with everything that's happening in your life right now, what are some of the things you're considering or dreaming about for the future?
Wow. I feel like that's changed so much over the years. Like I really am grateful to get back into doing radio again. Like it's been a blessing. It's been a lot of fun because I enjoyed doing radio before I started in this job. Just at the time it was just more volatile. It was just very unstable. It didn't pay particularly well, but the job itself was a lot of fun. And so to kind of get back to doing that has been a lot of fun. It's been great in the sense of meeting a new group of people and sort of forming a new community there. I also honestly like being able to look. I like football, and it's provided me a very good living. But I do like being able to talk about other sports. Right? It was fun to talk about the Dodgers this year. It's fun to talk about, I live in LA, to talk about the Lakers or whatever else, to talk about USC football. And so, being able to do that has been great again. I would love to go back to writing. I mean, one of my dreams in the future at some point, I would love to write a comic book or write a movie or something like that. I did. So this is the goofy nerd in me. I did write some sort of Batman fan fiction once upon a time, and somebody's like, you should actually turn this into like a real comic book or a story or something like that. So maybe that's one of the things I will do. I mean, beyond that, like my long-term dreams are to retire to like a fishing village on a Caribbean island somewhere and just have like have a small house and a garden and a couple of chickens and go fishing every day. Like that's my long-term, like down the road dream. Whenever this all falls apart, you'll find me, I don't know, somewhere like in the, the Dominican or Belize or somewhere, just somewhere in the Caribbean, just kind of like hanging out by the ocean all the time, just growing some carrots and picking eggs with the chickens and stuff like that. That's a long way to come, but definitely in the future.
I love that. So talking about comic books and graphic novels, what are some of your favorite comic books or graphic novels, and why do they hold as much value to you as classic literature?
I have always been a Spider-Man guy for real, because to me, Spider-Man, whether it's been Peter Parker or Miles Morales,
Yes.
Peter Parker and Miles Morales always had real people problems to me, right? Like you look at some of the other superheroes, Clark Kent, / Superman, Diana Prince / Wonder Woman, like they were not human, right? Like they were superhuman,
Yes.
even in their everyday lives.
True.
Bruce Wayne was a rich kid, right? He was a trust fund kid. Tony Stark was the same thing. He was a rich kid. Like so many of these folks, they were special even in their regular lives. Peter Parker
Agreed.
and Miles Morales, they were trying to figure out, like, they were trying to work their way through school, right? They were trying to navigate interpersonal relationships in their schools. Peter Parker had a boss who was a jerk. They were both trying to figure out how to make that girl in class or next door like them, right? They were trying to figure out dating.
Yeah.
They just had problems that to me were more identifiable. Plus I just thought the suit was cool, man. Like I really
Yeah.
did love that.
I-
Um,
Me too.
but I think part of it for me is like when you look at graphic novels and stuff. Um, I came to graphic novels sort of later in life. I didn't read a lot of comics as a kid. The first one that I ever read that sort of got me hooked was Watchmen. I had a coworker at the NFL actually suggested it to me. He loaned me his copy of it. I devoured it. I loved it so much that I gave him his bag and I bought my own so I could just read it whenever I wanted to. And I feel like at their best, they still do talk about the human condition. They talk about, problems, whether it's, interpersonal problems, whether it's societal problems. I mean, I think one of the big themes in Watchmen was, who will watch the Watchmen? It's about, who is in charge of protecting a society and who watches those people when they overstep their bounds and flex their power too much.
Yes.
I think there are so many social things that can be taken from comic books. It's funny. I think it wasn't before, but it isn't now. My pinned tweet for a long time on Twitter was one about Spider-Man, and it was sort of a joke, but it sort of stands to the point. It was an issue I think back in the late '80s where Dr. Octopus had stolen a vial of the AIDS virus, and was like threatening to release it if he didn't get what he wanted. And obviously, like in the context of Spider-Man, it kind of is funny, but obviously that was one of the big social issues of the time, and it sort of made its way into the graphic novel space. And so, while it's great, look, I love classic literature, right? War and
Yes.
Peace is a phenomenal book, right? I mean, Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison is one of my favorites. But sometimes it's fun to have some of those same heavy issues, but have them in full color with drawings and stuff like that. So like I know there are people who sort of look down their nose at comic books or whatever, but I think there's a lot that can be learned that when they are done well, I think they can be just as impactful and drive as much of a message as anything you get on your New York Times bestseller list.
That's amazing. I do believe comic books are like underrated because you have the pictures, you have the visuals, you have everything. And this is what we usually use in school right now. We use a lot of visuals with our kids. So
Mm.
comic books should be out there more, and people needs to like read more of comic books instead of the regular ones. And they do teach a lot of a lot of lessons, which is
Yeah.
really amazing. And you pointed out about Spider-Man, how he became from he comes from like us.
Yeah.
He started like us, someone that we can connect with. That's really it sums all. I love that.
Yeah.
How about music? What role does music play in your life, and how does it serve as a refuge for you?
It really is. I don't think I'm alone in this, right? Like when I'm sitting here and I'm writing and I'm researching, I'm usually listening to stuff. I will say I don't get to listen to my stuff as much anymore now that I'm a dad. I'm driving my son around. Like a lot of times we're listening
Yeah.
to kids music and nursery rhymes and that sort of thing. So I don't get to listen to my stuff as much. But it really is kind of a creative outlet. Like I don't play music necessarily. I would love to learn how to play, piano or guitar or something like that. But I do listen to music and use it to sort of spark other creative interests. Use it as inspiration for what I'm writing or just ideas to think about or when I finally do write that Batman fan fiction comic book that I've been working on, like music does sort of, kindle a lot of ideas there. And I mean, I think just there's so much of it emotionally, whether it is creativity, whether it's just sort of, either setting a mood or sort of using it to fit your mood. Sometimes when you are sad or depressed, there are songs that sort of are a soundtrack to that. There are songs that when you are excited or happy can sort of fill you in. There are songs that when you don't want to be sad, you can listen to make you feel better. I mean, I think that's just, and again, I don't think I'm, breaking any new ground here. I don't think I'm saying anything that people don't already know, but I do think that sometimes we maybe overlook that fact on a day-to-day basis because, sometimes music is just background noise, but a lot of times it can really kind of spur an emotional response as well.
I agree. Some words can connect with you. That's amazing. So you said that Los Angeles is your muse. In what ways does Los Angeles inspire you creatively or professionally?
I love this city, and I didn't grow up here. I grew up in Northern California, and it's funny because there's sort of a weird NorCal, SoCal rivalry. And I say it's weird because people from the Bay Area are like, LA sucks, I hate it, I can't stand it. And people from LA are like, yeah, man, the Bay Area is cool, I like to go visit. It's sort of weird like that. So when I first came here to go to school, to go to USC, I was one of those Northern California kids. I'm like, LA sucks. I'm just gonna go here for 4 years, and then I'm gonna go back home. And the longer I stayed here, the more I realized like this place is really, really cool because it's the best description I've ever heard of Los Angeles is that it is a collection of suburbs in search of a city. And that's really true because there's so many different little neighborhoods within the city of Los Angeles, and they all have their own distinct flavor to them. And I think you can live here forever. I mean, at this point, I've lived in LA for more than 20 years. There's still so much of it to see and discover and so many little pockets of it to find. And like there literally is something for everyone, right? And look, I can admit the flaws of the city. It is expensive. Traffic sucks. Sadly, unfortunately, the homeless problem is real here. And, I try to sort of, in the off season, I try to volunteer at a food bank just to sort of do my part, at least a little bit, to kind of chip in there. So like, there are legitimate problems here that, you have to sort of own up to, but there's also so many just really cool things to see and do and find and explore. And on top of that, and I don't think LA gets enough credit for truly being a beautiful city. And I say that, I remember the moment I first really fell in love with LA, it was probably my freshman year of college. And I don't know, it was just one of those days where I didn't want to go to class. I was tired. The semester was dragging on. I would rather be anywhere else. But it had just rained. And when either it rains or the wind blows and, the smog clears out, I just remember walking to class. It had just rained and the skies were clear. And I looked up and you see downtown LA, the skyline, and right behind that, you see the mountains with snow on the top of them. And you're like, this city is gorgeous, and it just sort of hit in a different way. And you start to realize the more you're here, the beauty of LA, whether it's the mountains or it's the beaches or even just the city itself, really just has kind of a heartbeat and a rhythm to it. The longer I live here, the less I want to leave, It's to the point that my dad now is just like, he's like, you're an LA guy. He's like, it suits you. He's like, it's not a bad thing. Like, you have found your space here and you look comfortable and the city really does suit you. And like, yeah, as long as I can afford to live here and be comfortable and be happy, like, I don't ever want to leave LA.
That's amazing. I love that. So I want to talk a little bit about your Atari.
Okay.
How do you think classic video games compare to modern ones in terms of enjoyment and creativity? Especially that you still play with your Atari 2600.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously modern video games like really blow it away in terms of what they do. Obviously, graphically, sure, that's not even a conversation. But in terms of like story and everything, they're definitely better. I think the old games are fun for nostalgia. I will say that I do every now and then turn it on and I'm like, I'm excited, I'm going to play this game. And then after about 10 or 15 minutes, I'm like, Okay. I'm ready to. I was already ready to go on to the next thing. I keep it for nostalgia purposes, and kind of every now and then fire it up. But yeah, no, it does not hold the same candle to it. But it's just kind of fun to go back, and at some point, I don't know, when my son is old enough, maybe I'll show it to him, and I'm sure he'll be
Yeah.
like, "Dad, what is this? Like, what are you showing me? This is terrible." But yeah, it today's video games by far like blow things away, but it is just kind of fun to kind of go back and see where things started. It's just two lines and a dot, just like ping ponging back and forth. Like it is fun to do it from that perspective. But yeah, I'm not gonna try to compare it to what we have now.
That's amazing. I love it. I start with Atari too. I was not big on games, but I did start with Atari as well. Marcus,
Oh.
talking, about sports and everything and NFL and stuff like that. Do you have a favorite sports team? Like for
I
you?
mean, if I had to pick one out of everything that I'm gonna live and
Yeah.
die with, I mean, it's probably the Dodgers. And maybe I'm
Wow.
biased right now because we just went through that World Series and it was
Yes.
absolutely amazing. But the Dodgers are incredible. I mean, I grew up as a 49ers fan, and I still sort of, probably get a little too emotional about them on a week to week basis. I will follow USC football probably till the day I die. But really, like I said, baseball was always my first love, and the
Yes.
Dodgers really are the team that has captured my heart. I will say this: living in LA too, there are really, when it comes to sports in this city, there are two things that everybody really gets behind. It's the Dodgers and the Lakers. Everybody else, you can kind of take it or leave it, right? Because if you're a USC fan, you don't like UCLA and vice versa. The Clippers, whatever, the Kings, whatever. But like when the Lakers and the Dodgers are good, this town really sort of comes to life. And that was kind of the amazing part of the last month as the Dodgers were going through the playoffs and the World Series, to see this city as a whole really just light up, man. I mean, like you drive around town, and every local, transit bus, had "Go Dodgers" on the front of it, and just everywhere you go, everybody wearing blue and just kind of like just feeling great about themselves and everybody else. So I think I'm gonna bleed Dodger blue for the rest of my life.
That's awesome. How about cartoon shows? Do you still watch or follow something
Um,
cartoon right now?
Not as much as I used to. I still watch anime. I am a One Piece junkie. I think I've watched over 1,000 episodes of One Piece at this point. I love things like Rick and Morty. I mean, I'll still go back if I see like a Bugs Bunny cartoon on. I'll sit and watch that for a little, a little bit too.
Right?
Um, I do. I
Tom
love
and
it. I would
Jerry.
say one of Tom and Jerry. It's great. One of my favorite moments as a dad so far was sitting and like talking to my son. I'm like, wait, what do you want to watch? And he said, let's watch Spider Man. And I'm like, my job as a parent is done. Like he
Yeah.
asked for it on his own. Like this is the greatest thing ever. So yeah, I mean, there's still like a lot of things I watch. I will turn it on. My wife doesn't care for it, so if I'm
Yeah.
watching cartoons and stuff, it's usually like after she's fallen asleep or gone to bed or something like that. Then
I
I'll stay
see.
up and watch my stuff. So, but yeah, I think that part of me will always exist. I'll always be kind of a kid in that regard.
I love that. I love that so much. I really don't want to finish this episode, Marcus. You've been a great guest to say the least. It's really amazing to get to know you better. I've known you for 3 years, I do believe now.
Yeah,
Was
yeah,
my third year coming to the expo. We spoke a little bit couple years ago, and this year we spoke a little bit more. And I cannot wait for this year to just sit and talk to you more. It's just amazing to get to know you better, a little bit better, to say the least. But before I finish, I always ask that question. Do you have a secret you want to share with the game changers, or something
Oh
that you never spoke of like ever before, and you want to share it on the show?
man, a secret. I think that so I don't know if it's a secret, but I'll kind of let you into a little bit of my path, things that I don't necessarily talk about a whole lot, but you asked me about how it is that I sort of try to connect with people and stay humble. And I told you like, some of the grind I went through to get here. I remember when for a while I lived in Fresno Fresno, California, and was working for a local radio station there. And I mean, we were a tiny, tiny little radio station. Like I covered a lot of high school sports and stuff like that, and I wasn't making any money. Um, and I remember at one point, having to figure out like, okay, this job's not paying me enough. I got to figure out how to pay rent. Um, I got a job. I would say I got a job as a paper man. Like I wasn't a paper boy. Like I was 30 years old and I got a paper route
Yeah.
to just to like make ends meet. Like I remember being again like 30 years old. It's 4 o'clock in the morning and I'm walking through the streets of Fresno like slinging the Fresno Bee and like really asking myself like, what am I doing here? Like why am I doing this? Like, is this really what I'm doing with my life? Is this really my career path? Like, do I still want to do this? And like, fortunately things sort of worked out. I mean, I think about all those jobs, right? The job
Yeah.
of being a paper boy, right? And having to collect monthly subscription fees. I had a job working at a dry cleaner, right? Where I'd work at a radio station part-time. And then in the evenings I would go work at a dry cleaner, for several hours a day. I worked at the Gap for a while. I was like a part-time high school football reporter. And then the other time I was folding khakis, in a mall. Stuff like that. So it's like I remember all those things, and like I look back on them now, and I'm like they helped get me to where I was and help make me who I am. But I would tell you that in the moment, you really do start to question like how badly you really want to do this, right? When it's 4:30 in the morning and somebody's dog is barking at you when you just tried to toss the newspaper. I'm like, I don't need this, man. You don't, but I'm grateful for all the experiences because it kind of helped me to where I am now.
That's amazing. That's what, make you the person you are. You went through something that many people maybe go through and they never talk about, and you are talking your truth tonight, Marcus. I cannot thank you enough for sharing all of this. I just want to say, when you write that comic book, the first edition, you're gonna sign it and send it to me. That's what I'm gonna
Absolutely,
say.
100%,
That's what I'm gonna
absolutely.
say. I love our conversation together. And before I conclude, Marcus, could you please let our audience know how they can connect with you and where to find you on social media?
Yeah. Usually I tell people like the place to find me is on Twitter at Marcus G. Like you see it down there, MarCasG. But I guess I should mention that like I'm like everybody else. I'm kind of moving over to Blue Sky now, so it's the same handle. It's Marcus G over at Blue Sky. So I for the moment I'm still a little bit in both, but I feel like the Blue Sky thing is probably happening for me. I mean, other than that, NFL Fantasy Live on NFL Network. We're on 5 days a week. You can find us at 6 o'clock Eastern. Also doing the NFL Fantasy Football podcast. I'm on Sirius XM Radio on Saturday mornings. That show is from 10 to noon. And then I do some stuff with Fantasy Life on Sunday mornings. We stream live there as well. But again, if you just follow me either on Twitter or at Blue Sky at Marcus G, you will figure out a lot of the places that I am.
That's amazing. I love it. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Game Changers. We hope you enjoyed our conversation with Marcus Grant and gained valuable insights into his word and the word of fantasy football. Thank you, Marcus, for sharing your experiences, life lessons, and wisdom with us. We appreciate you a lot. Join us for the next episode of the Game Changers on Wednesday, November 20th, where I welcome Ryan Kennedy with his beautiful princess as my special guests. I also want to express my gratitude to Evan, Iggy, JC, the whole TSA team for their continued support and providing me with this exceptional platform, sharing my guests' authentic stories and experiences. A special acknowledgement goes to JC for his invaluable contributions behind the scene. Your efforts are deeply appreciated. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. Your feedback helps us improve and reach more viewers like you. Follow us on social media to stay updated on upcoming episodes and join our community the Sports Affiliation, where everyone is welcome. Until next time, keep challenging the game and making your mark. This is Carla and Marcus signing off. Have a great evening, everybody.